So every so often there's the inevitable anti-cat article that you see online. Today I was looking just through some articles, and then I saw this inevitable article which was about what do we do with the cat problem. You know, this cat problem. You really don't hear about what do we do with the dog problem. No, it's cats. And so let me sort of start off by saying that I live with a few adopted cats, and we do our best to be very responsible. We bring them in the early evening before birds are doing whatever they're feeding or whatever they're doing. We bring them in early evening. We basically keep them in from early evening till sort of about 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock the next morning. And they're quite happy to be inside during that time. And then when we let them out for that, what usually becomes like 8 hours, we do it in a sort of a controlled way, and we always keep an eye on them. And then when we go out, we will bring them inside before we go out, and then we sort of let them out again, and we keep an eye on them. And we also put Bird Be Safe collars on them, which are colorful cloth collars that actually alert birds. Birds see them, and they're very effective. So we actually do our very best to be responsible. And these cats were dumped in various places, dumped either at a shelter, somewhere outside. One of our cats was a very young sort of a kitten, and was dumped outside a pizza place. Another cat was brought to us by someone up the road when we lived in another city, and another rural city. We live rurally. And if they were going to take them down to the local RSPCA at Christmas time, which would have meant certain death. He's no longer with us, but basically these cats at some stage in their life were either became inconvenient and or something happened and the people could no longer look after them. Now, for those who are not vegan, you may have your hand already on the unsubscribe button. Some of you, no, I'm not saying all of you, but some people, because this is going to be an uncomfortable subject, and I'm going to, and I don't believe in holding back when it comes to our moral compartmentalization as a species and our hypocrisy as a species. So if you have trouble with that, you may have trouble with this entire video. So I'm just giving you a heads up now that that I'm vegan, and I don't have a selective policy of that I don't believe in that I believe certain animals are okay to be bred into existence for us to be companions with. I don't hold that particular position, and I would hope that other people who are vegan would not hold that position either. So let me say I absolutely love living with the cats that we are living with, and it's not their fault that they're in this situation. And I do not believe in people seem to think that it is perfectly fine for us to domesticate certain animals and use them for food, entertainment, clothing, and other resources. And cats fall into that category. They are seen as property. Still, even if we love them as a family member, society still sees them as property. And when people get tired of them, or they become inconvenient, or they're not, we don't like them, or whatever, for whatever reason, it's okay to just either kill them by any method, really, and it's also fine to take them down to the shelter. And the shelter, depending on what they are, most shelters are kill shelters, then it's okay to get the shelter to kill them. These are sentient beings, by the way. They love life just like we do and do not want to die. And the same goes for dogs. Dogs are also viewed this way as property by our society because we live in a non-vegan society mostly. Veganism is taking hold. It's an ethical position. It's not a health kick. It's not any of those things that mostly is presented as veganism. It's an ethical position. Basically, cats and dogs, no matter what we think of them, no matter how much we might love them, they are viewed as property. And I could, if I wanted to, take them all down to a kill shelter and say, vets, of course, don't have to follow through with this, but some do. You can just say, well, I don't want them anymore. Can you kill them? That's where we're at with any animal that is not human. Any non-human animal we consider we view as property, and that's all of them, really, even the ones we fetishize, and that includes dogs and whales and all of that. So this fetishization of certain animals is really unfortunate, not only for the animal, but for us, because this attitude we have of that it's okay to kill sentient animals for food, clothing, entertainment, and other reasons is deeply connected to the other violence in the world, including our imperialist wars, etc. There's a Tolstoy quote that says, where there are slaughterhouses, there will be battlefields. So that's something we need to keep in mind. But back to cats. So I was reading this, I had a quick look at the title of this article and how cats are responsible for a lot of carnage of different wildlife, in quotes. This is wildlife that Australians like to look at, you know, as if they don't have their own purpose for being here. We already start from a speciesist position that this wildlife is here for us to look at, that we value it because it's here for us to look at, that we value it because it's got some sort of nationalistic representation for us, and it's got nothing to do with animals just living for their own purposes, and that, you know, they're just sentient beings. They don't have any particular sort of a hold on whether they happen to be some special fetishized animal. They're just living their own life, and they probably would like to be left alone, basically. And unfortunately, so that's our speciesist position to start with. And then, unfortunately, a lot of people, we designate certain animals into, you know, different categories. Food, that's cows and sheep, pigs, fish, etc. And then there's entertainment, horse riding, and, you know, sort of dogs, cats can be put into that category, or they're seen as companion animals, whatever, in quotes. There's clothing, wool, and all those animals that are bred for clothing are tortured and killed. There's, you know, we have all these different categories that we've decided that these sentient animals belong in. So anyway, back to cats. I'm trying to get around to the issue of cats. Well, we don't really recognize that dogs are actually responsible for a lot of killing as well. They kill a lot of koalas in Australia. They kill a lot of different animals. But because you'll see articles about dogs where they say, well, dogs and humans have a special bond, as if cats and people do not have a special bond. And I often look at this issue of cats and the vilification of cats that is done regularly in the media and by environmental groups who, by the way, are mostly not vegan, and they will not acknowledge that veganism is an incredible step to address the devastating economic, environmental impact of animal agriculture, and I'm going to get to that in a minute. So cats are usually vilified in society, and I see it as closely connected with misogyny. And I think it stems back in part with the Inquisition, where women were killed during the Inquisition by the millions. They were tortured and killed because it was all about property, claiming property, and also about disempowering women and putting them back in a kind of a property status themselves. And a lot of those women, there were a lot of women who had cats, and if they had cats, the cats were killed, and if they had cats, they were killed because they had cats, and they must be witches, that kind of thing. But it was all about stealing women's property, and also a patriarchal society that didn't want women to have any power or any sort of agency of their own. And I feel like a lot of the hatred of cats is because cats cannot be basically owned. You can't really own a cat. Cats, if they do not like where they are, they will eventually leave. If they are being abused, they will eventually find somewhere else to live. And in my life, I never even had to go to a shelter to adopt a cat until just in the last 15 years. They would actually find me and my family. People would abuse them, and then they would come and live. They would come and find a place that was friendly to them. And cats they didn't start off as domestic animals. They were domesticated by people, by human beings. They unfortunately decided to come and visit humans, and humans decided to eventually domesticate them. And it was kind of, for a while, it was a symbiotic sort of relationship, and then it turned into a completely dysfunctional one where they were completely domesticated and really not capable of fending for themselves. Eventually, if cats find their way back into the wild, they might be able to fend for themselves somewhat, but most cats can't. So they've kind of been infantilized to some degree, and their instincts are sort of a bit dysfunctional because they still have this instinct to kill, but most cats don't even know what to do when they've actually killed an animal. So anyway, this misogyny and this anti-cat thing are very closely connected, I think. And it's also, it's about the fact that, you can't own cats. And unfortunately, we live in a patriarchal society where there is still this idea that women are sort of lesser. And in some cases, property, where men kill women when they become depressed and they have a family, and instead of killing themselves, they kill their whole family. There's still this underlying notion, and in Western society, where women are viewed still as lesser. And cats cannot be basically trained, they can't really be herded, and all that kind of thing. And I think, and it's something that there are some people that really resent the fact that they cannot dominate a particular species of animals. So what do? They find ways of vilifying them, and instead of owning the fact that we're not vegan and that we are contributing tremendously to the environmental decline of this planet, to the sixth mass extinction, to the climate crisis by not being vegan. And I'm going to show you this meme that I show people fairly regularly on this channel when I talk about this issue directly. According to a study, the most recent study, the largest study to date, of 114 countries, 40,000 farms from farm to fork, everything we eat, 90% of all we eat, the result of that largest study to date was that a vegan diet, a plant-based diet, a diet free of dairy, meat, eggs, fish, etc., is the single biggest thing one can do to address not only the climate crisis, but eutrophication, acidification, land shortages, water shortages, the sixth mass extinction, the destruction of the Amazon rainforest. 5.2 acres every minute are cleared for animal agriculture in the Amazon rainforest, or for soy to feed animals in the in Western countries in feedlots. So anyway, this largest study to date by Dr. Joseph Poore and his team discovered that adopting a plant-based diet was the single biggest thing one could do, bigger than driving electric cars or not taking planes, all that kind of thing. So where do you hear that conclusion to that largest study to date? In the corporate media, or in environmental groups, or Extinction Rebellion? Do you hear anybody really talking about that? Not really. And let me point out something about the amount of land that's left if we all became vegan. Literally continents, Australia, China, the EU, and I think it was the US. Basically, large continents of land are left that are used, for animal agriculture. The amount of land that would be left if we became vegan, and we would still be able to feed the planet, not even using those continents. So I'm going to show you that meme. I probably didn't explain that meme very well, but I'll show you that. Now, anybody who looks at that information looks really at that information with honesty, and isn't in some sort of denial because they don't want to actually change their they don't want to change their behavior. They don't want to acknowledge that. They'd rather say, well, wait until capitalism ends and then I'll become vegan, or wait until there's a socialist society and I'll become vegan, or wait until we stop with the fossil fuels and we have all renewables and then I'll become vegan. And they go through a list of poor excuses, because heaven forbid we should change our diet to save ourselves from imminent human extinction and from the sixth mass extinction, which we are on the front lines of. Heaven forfend that we should do something like that doesn't require any permission from any government or from our families or from corporations. We can do that right now, become vegan, and look what we could do as individuals and as a collective on this planet to basically mitigate the worst of what is coming in the next few decades. And why don't we do it? Because we value our taste buds over our own imminent extinction and the killing and torturing of 1 to 3 trillion land and aquatic animals every year. This is our excuse, that we like the taste of flesh and secretions from animals, from sentient animals, that we put them in paddocks and fatten them up and then murder them, torture and take their children from them and murder them, and keep breeding them into existence by the hundreds of billions, and then we scoop up everything in the oceans. The reason that the oceans are dying is because we are basically fishing them. There's going to be no fish left in the ocean by 2048. And so if we think about just even in the logistics of animal agriculture, according to what I saw on Chris Hedges on Contact, by 2050, the planet's population will be about 10.5 billion, and animal agriculture will no longer be able to feed the planet. It's not sustainable, period, but it also will not be able to feed the planet. So basically we have to let go or be dragged. So if we're looking at that study, the largest study to date, and it's going to that black hole in the back of our head, and we just pretend we didn't see it because it's inconvenient, then we need to ask ourselves, truly, why are we wringing our hands about this in the environment? Why are we wringing our hands about the climate crisis and losing sleep at night time when we can't do something so simple as adopt a plant-based diet and also eschew any sort of exploitation of animals, period. We do not need these animal products at all to survive. We can easily meet all our nutrition requirements from plants and other non-animal sources. So the only reason we're causing this sixth mass extinction, which we like to blame on anybody else, like cats or whatever, we vilify cats, and yet we can't get it together to adopt a plant-based diet, and we pretend like we haven't seen information that we have, and we pretend that some animals have sentience and other animals are food. The mental gymnastics that we do as a species is truly astonishing, and one has to really ask oneself, with the amount of violence we do to other human beings, which I say is closely related to what we do to non-human animals. Just look at how our imperialist wars are torturing and killing human beings all over the planet by the millions and causing massive internal displacement, and also asylum seekers coming by the millions. These are all related to our animal product consumption and the way we think about non-human animals, the way we like to ignore their sentience and otherize them so that we can use them. And we do the same thing to people. We like to make certain groups targets of violence so that we can go and invade their countries and kill them and take their land. We did this to indigenous peoples in this country, Australia, and in the United States. A genocide because they were inconvenient. We wanted to take their land, and so we decided to make them targets of violence. Well, we do the same thing to non-human animals, and in this case that I started this talk off, it is about cats. We like to, instead of looking at our own destruction, which is massive, we're basically bringing the planet, most of the life on the planet, to some kind of a dreadful end, rather than own that ourselves, rather than people, instead of vilifying cats, owning that themselves and saying, I need to do something. I need to acknowledge those studies. I need to acknowledge that all animals, not just cats and dogs and the ones we fetishize, all animals have sentience and they have the right not to be used as property and resources. Instead of that, we like to point our fingers at cats and say cats are killing this many wildlife, and therefore they need to be locked up for their entire life in a house, given a few toys to play with, while we go out and enjoy the freedom and keep eating our animal products and keep driving our cars and all of that, our fossil fuel cars. But we feel quite justified in keeping cats inside a house that all they can do all day is either sleep or look out the window and watch life pass them by. That's what we've designated to cats. That is their life, and we think it's quite justifiable because heaven forbid that wildlife, a certain amount of wildlife is going to be killed. A certain amount of wildlife is going to be killed when we put them in that place in the first place. We domesticated them. We keep breeding them into existence by the millions every year. Does anybody who likes to point the finger at cats say, well, maybe we should stop breeding cats into existence? Cats are not going to go extinct. They're in the forest. People dump them in the forest all the time. There's cats who are breeding. They breed, and then those kittens grow up in the forest and they become feral. And then, of course, we like to go and murder them because we don't want to take responsibility for the fact that we're breeding them into existence and they're dying by the millions in shelters, being killed in shelters every year. Completely healthy animals, kittens, cats, dogs, and all sorts of animals by the millions being killed in shelters. No, we don't think about any of that because we're the most important species on the planet, aren't we? We're the crown of creation. We have a right to destroy whatever we want to destroy. We have a right to kill whomever we want to kill because we are the most important animal on the planet. We don't even think of ourselves as animals. We think of ourselves as some kind of special, superhuman, wonderful creature, that wonderful being that is almost like godlike and has some direct relationship with God, a supernatural being. But we don't see these other animals, that they are earthlings on the planet. They belong here just as much as we do. They have a right not to be interfered with, not to be threatened, not to be tortured, trapped, killed, drowned, and bred into existence and kept in cages, kept in houses where they spend their whole life till the time they die. We think that all of that is fine. Whatever we do to non-human animals, whatever we do to other human beings on the planet, and I'm talking about white supremacy now, we think that's totally fine, because white people are the most important people on the planet, and we have a right to imperialize, to colonize. And then, of course, there's patriarchy. And patriarchy, look where it's brought us. Would a matriarchy be any better? I don't think so. We need to have a complete consciousness shift. And that includes becoming vegan. We have to change our way, our vilification, our speciesism, our otherizing of non-human animals who are sentient animals and have a right to be here, just like we do. And they have a right not to be used as things, as property. So what I'm saying is that even though I love living with cats, I think they're the most incredible sentient animals. I love dogs too, but I just happen to live with cats. And I totally acknowledge the destruction that they do naturally, because it's their instinct to hunt. It's their instinct to hunt. And I don't know why people leave cats out. I don't know why people allow cats to come and go at nighttime, particularly in Australia. I don't understand it. But people will do that, and then that just gives further fuel to this idea that cats are the problem, and that we need to basically lock them up the entire time, and that we have no responsibility with the environmental destruction. It's all about cats. And I've said what connections that has to misogyny and to the Inquisition and all of that sort of thing, and also the fact that we can't control them. So anyway, I don't believe, as a vegan, and this may be hard for people to hear, but as I say, I love living with cats. I really, really love cats. They're all individuals, just like other animals that we use for food and clothing, etc., and other entertainments. They all have individual personalities. They have their likes and their dislikes. They have self-awareness and so on. I love living with cats, but if it meant that I had the only 2 cats that were fertile, that would mean that, we could keep this domestication going of cats and breeding them into existence. I would not want any more cats to be bred into existence, domesticated like it is right now, with millions dying and being killed in shelters, and the sort of lives that they lead, being mostly locked up in houses. I mean, we give our cats the best life we possibly can. We try and be as responsible in this speciesist non-vegan society as we possibly can. We recognize that we are preventing them from their natural instincts and so forth, but we have to do that within this speciesist society. But I'm saying to you that I would not be breeding cats into existence to be used as, and certainly not the sort of diabolical things they breed cats to have, smushed in faces that have respiratory problems and all sorts of things, and they do that to dogs. Certainly that is an abomination as well. But cats will never go out of existence, because there's plenty in forests. But I don't believe in domestication of non-human animals. So as much as I love living with cats, if I had control over that, I would not be breeding. Like, as I said, if I had the last 2 fertile cats in the world, I would not be breeding them into existence for this continuing abomination and cruelty of domestication. Because if I truly believe in, as an ethical position veganism is, if I truly believe that animals are not here for us to use for food, clothing, entertainment, and all of that, if I truly believe that, then that applies to the animal that I find so wonderful and love living with. I have to be morally consistent. So anyway, that's, I don't know if I've expressed everything about this issue, but it's something that I get so tired of seeing, because it's like, isn't there enough now that we put on cats, blaming them for, for the killing of other animals, when look at what we do as a species, and haven't we done enough that we're actually locking them up in houses and they never ever get to really go outside, and when they do, they're on a leash, and they might get out for a little while, then they're put back inside, and then, you know, in these climates where it's really, really hot sometimes, or it's really cold, there are cats that are freezing outside, and there's dogs that are freezing outside, and there's cats that are boiling, you know, they're in these terrible conditions inside houses, tiny, tiny houses. It's sort of mental torture for a lot of animals, and they end up with these terrible anxieties. And sadly, because we continue on, the pet industry is making a killing, literally. They're making billions and billions of dollars, and the governments love it because they get all the taxes and they get money from that. It's a huge billion-dollar industry, the pet industry, and look at the vets. Veterinary, how much they charge now to treat cats. I mean, look how much veterinarians charge to treat cats now. I mean, we've spent thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars over the years. Thousands. And we couldn't really afford it, but we do our best. But there are people that can't afford to take cats to the vet. So these cats just suffer. That's another thing. That's become this outrageously, veterinarians charging outrageous amounts of money. And they say, a lot of vets say they love animals, and yet they're charging enormous amounts of money that most people can't afford. So there's people everywhere making profits off cats and dogs and other animals, putting aside the animal products. Huge amounts of money. Does anybody say, maybe we should stop breeding these animals into existence, period? No. Because they're making huge amounts of money. They've made careers out of it. The pet industry, the vet industry, basically. The governments. You don't hear governments suggesting to stop breeding these cats and dogs into existence. Nope. And you certainly won't hear governments talking about veganism, and you won't hear Extinction Rebellion talking about veganism, and you won't hear Bill McKibben talking about veganism, or Naomi Klein talking about veganism, or 350.org talking about veganism. You won't hear any mention of the documentary Seaspiracy and the Seaspiracy on Instagram. Check that out to see the devastation we're doing to the oceans. It's outrageous. You won't hear anything like that, but you'll hear how cats are so awful and so devastating for the environment. Or cars. Or other, or palm oil. And then you hear these ridiculous arguments like, but what about plants? I can't be vegan because what about plants? Don't get me started on that stupid one. So anyway, it's just so sad, and if I sound a little bit peeved, it's because I get really tired of this vilification of certain animals, and us not, as human beings, not taking responsibility for what our species is doing. And, I've often said it, I feel like our species is too stupid to live. Seriously. Because this is where we're at the present time. Pointing at cats or basically trying to find something to blame for what we are doing. And that we're not going to do anything because capitalism. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say. So if you know of somebody who starts to go on about cats, just show them those memes or go to the Dr. Paws study and say, well, and maybe you shouldn't be blaming other animals. It's all our fault. What's going on right now, the sixth mass extinction, which we are on the front lines of, is all our fault, not cats.